very long history of the marathon. The marathon was born from the inspiration of history, inspired by the story of Phidippides, the ancient messenger who, it is said, in 490 BC, ran all the way to Athens from the Battle of Marathon, bearing news of victory. In 1946, a modern-day Phidippides would arise in Greece, a man who, in the midst of terror and starvation, would come to symbolize the nation's struggle and its fortitude. Stylianos Kyriakides lived haunted by a crystallizing day, a day when he was saved while so many others were not. That moment would spur him to greatness and onto a marathon of no small consequence, a marathon dedicated to his nation.
He spoke often about the spirit, the Greek spirit. He said, we're warriors. We fight for what we believe in.
My father felt that he was part of this history, this tradition. He believed that it was his destiny to survive.
The Greeks believed that fate is written, imira είναι γραμμένη. Stylianos Kyriakides had this vision to run for his people.
In the beginning, Stylianos Kyriakides had no legitimate reason to aspire to anything. Born prematurely, the youngest of 5, he'd be burdened with the lowest of expectations. Growing up in a 2-room house, in poverty, on the Greek-speaking island of Cyprus. By age 14, Stylianos Kyriakides left school to support his family.
He became a dishwasher, became a waiter, and did menial chores. But he said, this is not enough, I must have more. After work, he would take his jacket off and throw it alongside the road and start running. And he said, I ran like an animal. I love to run.
People would say to me, who are you, Kyriakides? You are no athlete. You'll be picking up the pebbles of the other runners.
Whenever he saw somebody in the street, he stopped running so that they wouldn't realize that he was training and go and say, you know, what a crazy guy.
At 23 years old, in 1933, he entered the Pan-Cypriot Games. And in a 2-day period, he won the 1,500 meter, the 5,000 meter, the 10,000 meter, and the half a marathon. And at that point, they realized that he was too big for the island, and he had to go run for Greece.
Soon he was training inside the Olympic Stadium in Athens, running in the footsteps of the greatest Greek sports icon of all, Spiridon Louis, winner of the 1896 Olympic Marathon, the event invented for those games, honoring the trail Phidippides took to Athens. In 1934, at the Balkan Games, the country found a new athletic hero. Kyriakides broke Louis's long-standing marathon record.
He had just broken the record of a god.
There was a riot. Interviews, photographs. People wanted to meet him. He became a national hero.
At that moment, he realized that I will be a top runner in this world. And off he went to run the marathon in the Olympic Games in Berlin, Germany.
100,000 people jammed Berlin Stadium for the 11th Olympiad. Among them, Führer Adolf Hitler.
The Greek team came in first, like they always do in the Olympic Games, and the crowd just erupted in cheers.
It was something very emotional for us. They wanted to show that they had a special attention to our team because we are the country from where the Olympics came.
It was all a lie, a magnificent deception. Hitler's professed devotion to Greek civilization. The Germans even staged the first ever torch relay originating from Olympia. And here was the most famous Greek Olympian of all, Spiridon Luis presenting an olive branch to the Führer. As a symbol of love and peace, Luis said, that our nations will meet solely in such peaceful competition.
Ich verkünde die Spiele von Berlin zur Feier der 11. Olympiade neuer Zeitrechnung als eröffnet.
Stylianos Kyriakides was so thrilled to represent Greece, to compete in the highest level of world athletics. It was there that he met one of the greatest friends he ever had, Johnny Kelly.
August 9th, 1936. American Johnny Kelly comes to the Olympic marathon as the newly crowned king of his hometown race in Boston. He'd meet Kyriakides at the starting line in Berlin. Kyriakides is 11, Kelly 18. Though out of the medals, both are too young to be discouraged. Both see too much possibility still ahead.
After the race, Johnny came to him and said, "You are a great champion, and I hope someday you come to Boston and run the greatest marathon in the world."
Long-distance stars from every corner of the nation start the 26-mile grind in the 42nd running of the Boston Athletic Association Marathon.
Inspired by the Athens Olympic Marathon of 1896, a year later, Boston starts its own. By 1938, the city had larger ambitions to become the world's signature marathon. Stylianos Kyriakides legitimized that ambition. He was an Olympic marathoner from the birthplace of the Games, world class. Boston issued him bib number 1.
Kyriakides was hailed as a modern Phidippides. That was the name of the Athenian who ran from the Battle of Marathon to announce victory over the Persians.
He was a Greek, and a prominent Greek runner coming here to run in, what, the marathon. It's one of the great memories of my childhood.
Though in a foreign land, this was the America of immigrants. As soon as he arrived, Kyriakides discovered the depth of support he'd be getting from the city's large Greek-American community. There were hearty meals, comfortable lodging, but also a gift that was no prize, his very first pair of new running shoes.
You should never wear new shoes in a big race, and he paid for them.
About halfway through the race, his feet started hurting. He looked down, and the blisters on his feet had broken, and the blood was oozing from his shoes.
The first runners began coming through and finishing, "No Kyriakides, no Kyriakides, where is he?"
And finally he stopped, and he was brokenhearted. He hailed a cab. He had no money, but he says, "I'd take me through the finish line."
And then I remember a lone runner got out of the taxi cab. It was Kyriakides. He had dropped out. Devastation in the Greek community.
He was wearing bib number 1, but this successor to Phidippides, this son of Greece, the anticipated conqueror of Boston, fails to even finish.
That's when he told Jerry Nason, the Boston Globe sports writer, "Someday I'm going to come back and win this race."
Troops fought desperately and unequally against the German steamroller.
The German army was made known tonight as advancing into Greece. Raised the Nazi swastika on some part of Mount Olympus.
On April 27th, 1941, after more than a year of successful resistance against the Axis powers, the city of Athens, the heart of Greece, falls to German forces.
German tanks came thundering down the Athenian streets, and the swastika was placed on top of the Acropolis.
It was a shattering emotion, a feeling that one life was ending and another life was beginning, where you couldn't anticipate or say what the next day or the day after or the 4 years of occupation would bring.
When the Nazis came in, they took everything. They took all the food, the clothing, the medicine. The Greek people were left to starve.
In the first winter under Nazi occupation, an astonishing 250,000 Greek civilians die of starvation, prompting Nazi Field Marshal Hermann Goering to respond, "Let them perish, so long as no German starves."
I recall people dying in the streets, screaming, "I'm hungry." I remember carts carrying the dead bodies to the morgue. It was an experience that I think insults the civilization of every human being.
They came to our houses, the Germans. They intruded everywhere. There was nowhere that you could feel safe.
Greek resistance remains, as does Nazi retribution.
There wouldn't be 5 lives taken to say we are even now, but there would be 500 lives taken.
In 1943, the entire male population of Kalavrita is put to death. 1,436 men and boys, all gone in an instant.
Whole villages were wiped out. Old people, young people, babies, infants, men, women, everybody. Truly unprecedented sacrifices.
One night in 1943, Kyriakides and his wife Iphigenia were out for a walk in their neighborhood, and they were stopped by German patrol.
The Germans jumped out of the trucks and ran around and surrounded the men and said to the women, "Go home, go home." They took all these men to the town hall, and they said, "You have killed a soldier, a German soldier. You shall pay."
Kyriakides, fearing for a moment like this, had always carried his credentials from running in the Berlin Olympics.
One of the officers said, "Show me your papers."
When the German officer saw this pass on him, he said, "What is this? Who are you?" He said, "My name is Kyriakides. I ran in the Berlin Olympics."
So he said, okay, anybody who has taken part in the Olympic Games in Berlin cannot die, and he's let free.
The next day, he saw all those other men hanging from trees. They were all killed as an act of reprisal against the killing of German soldiers.
If you are saved when so many others have perished, you bear a certain burden. You are freighted with an enduring guilt. Stylianos Kyriakides determined his burden, his guilt, could be answered by thawing an ambition frozen by war. By becoming, somehow, at last, the runner, the winner he knew he could be.
He had survived when many of his Olympic teammates had died from malnutrition. Many of his countrymen had died from atrocities. He felt the weight of that, of surviving.
He said, somehow, some way, even though I'm a small man, I must do something for my country. I will run again to show that the Greeks still live.
Allied liberation in 1944 offered Greece a temporary reprieve from the nearly 4 long years of tormented suffering. But as other nations began the slow recovery from the world's worst war, hunger, terror, and death resumed in Greece when one of history's cruelest civil wars set Greek loyalist against Greek communist, both grappling for control of a country shattered by Nazi brutality.
In 1946, the Greek people were in need of heroes. Greece was a derelict, literally dilapidated country. There were no factories, there were no jobs, there was no food. It was a desperate country and miserable people. Then came Stylianos Kyriakides.
He told his wife that I have a vision. I want to go to America and run in the Boston Marathon. I want to bring the plight of the Greek nation to the whole world.
And his wife said, Stylianos, with tears down her eyes, look at you, you're starved. You're a skeleton.
How can you run? You haven't run in 6 years.
You'll die in the street.
She didn't think that he could even walk a mile, never mind run 26 miles.
But he never once doubted. He thought of himself as Phidippides, running from marathon to stand before his countrymen and say, rejoice, my people, we are victorious. And he said, I had made up my mind I was going to win or die.
1946, the 50th anniversary of the Boston Marathon. The favorite is Johnny Kelly, defending champion, Olympic marathoner, the man who had invited Kyriakides to Boston 8 years before. But in those years, of course, everything has changed. Kyriakides is 36 years old and arrives in Boston to run for his people, looking like someone who has lived too long in the shadow of death.
I was shocked. He was skinny, very thin, but he always had the spirit.
The runner's mission, however, is in doubt, right up to the start of the 1946 Boston Marathon. But affluent Greek Americans George and Harry Demeter get Kyriakides to the starting line and keep him there.
Minutes before the race, a doctor walked up from the Boston Athletic Association and told him, we have decided that you can't run because we feel you will die in the streets.
So my uncle pleaded with him, you can't just stop him. We've given everything to help this man, not only him, but his country, his family.
And the doctor shrugged and said, okay, he runs.
George Demeter was a scholar of Greek history. So before the race, he gave my father a piece of paper.
But Demeter told him, do not turn the paper over till the end of the race.
My father read one side of the paper. It said, Itan I epitas, win or die.
That was a phrase uttered by Spartan mothers to their sons before battle. And it meant literally, with it or on it. Come home with your shield or on your shield dead.
Die rather than retreat.
He felt the weight of carrying not just the fate of Greece in 1946, but the legacy of 2,500 years of Greek will, character, and life.
101 long-distance runners compete in the 50th annual marathon race, and all eyes are on courageous Stylianos Kyriakides of Greece.
My father feels good, and he starts running fast.
Dropped his arms, and he started threading his way through the pack.
And suddenly he's running together with Johnny Kelly.
Stylianos Kyriakides of Athens, Greece, catches the favorite John Kelly, 1945 winner.
They looked at each other, said nothing, and started running in lockstep.
It was one of the epic battles. Here are these two men who have been running for over 25 miles. And they're moving at an extraordinary pace.
Kyriakides began hallucinating. He said, I could see my family having only peas to eat. I could see the torches around the Acropolis and the Greek flag before my eyes.
And suddenly he heard an old man yell out, "Ya την Ελλάδα, ya ta παιδιά σου," for Greece, for your children.
Kyriakides said that at that moment, my feet became like the wings of Hermes. And Kelly said I made a fatal mistake of looking over my shoulder. He ran by me like I was tied to a tree.
Pandemonium broke loose. He did it! He did it! Like a miracle.
And when he crossed the finish line, he said, for Greece.
For Greece.
For Greece.
For Greece.
For Greece.
Kyriakides goes on to win in 2 hours, 29 minutes, 27 seconds, and gain the laurel wreath.
Kyriakides set the best time in the world for that year, 1946. Increased his personal best by 16 minutes. That for a man who was going to die in the streets.
After crossing the finish line, Kyriakides took the piece of paper that was given him by George Demeter, turned it over, and on it said, "Neni kikame," we are victorious. Exactly what Phidippides said after the Battle of Marathon.
The impact in the Greek community was electric. I mean, he had won, and then went off as a kind of triumphant hero all over the United States, asking for help for his people. That was really extraordinary, and a great lesson for all of us about what a great athlete can do.
It is not often that one man can awaken distant nations at the very same time. But this man did just that. Stylianos Kyriakides made America aware of a starving, dying Greece. He made his homeland aware of the power still left in the land of Phidippides, the land of Spiridon Luis, the land of Olympians.
When my father came back to Greece, people were dancing, they were hugging each other, cheering.
There was a crowd estimated at about 1 million people from the airport to the middle of Athens waiting for him.
Kyriakides' victory brought the hope that we are still here, that we exist as a country, as people, as athletes. Kyriakides was Greece.
Ο Kyriakides ήταν η Ελλάδα.
Few men in history could mean so much to their people as Stylianos Kyriakides did. He brought pride, he brought confidence to the entire Greek nation, to the entire Greek people. He was admired and loved and will never be forgotten.
Perhaps you recognize the voice of the narrator, the noted actor Sam Waterston, and we thank him for his contribution to a remarkable story. Now, just before the start of the games, a sculpture was unveiled here, a gift to the city of Marathon, produced in the United States, created by a Massachusetts artist, Miko Kaufman. It depicts together Stylianos Kyriakides on the left, winner of the 50th Boston Marathon, and Spiridon Luis on the right, the Greek shepherd who was the winner of the first Olympic marathon. Stylianos Kyriakides died in 1987 at age 77. 77, the same number he wore on his shirt in the 1946 Boston Marathon, the number he said he wore for luck.